is opening a new horizon for jobs in developing countries. It holds significant potential for young people, women, and other vulnerable groups, but also comes with challenges. The World Bank report, Working Without Borders, The Promise and Peril of Online Gig Work, provides recommendations for countries to leverage these opportunities and mitigate risks while expanding social protections for all. Over the past decade, technology has fundamentally shifted traditional work patterns. It has brought economic opportunity and jobs to millions of people simply with access to broadband and a digital device. Online gig work is work that is performed and delivered online, independent of location. These jobs now account for as much as 12% of the global labor force, a number higher than earlier estimates. While developed countries dominate the demand for gig workers, demand from developing countries is rising at a much faster rate. For example, in sub-Saharan Africa, job postings on the largest digital platform grew by 130%, while the growth rate in North America was just 14%. A flexible workforce benefits businesses, especially small firms and startups, to remain competitive and agile in a dynamic market. This helps firms grow and create more jobs. Unsurprisingly, 3/4 of online platforms are in fact regional or local and not global. The online gig economy can play an important role in countries that are struggling with high levels of youth unemployment or underemployment. Young people are attracted to gig work to earn income, learn new skills, or have the flexibility to combine gig work with school or another job. And because online gig work provides flexibility in time and location, it can support increased participation for women, young people, and others in the labor market. In fact, in most regions, women are participating in the online gig economy to a greater extent than they are participating in the general labor market. Online gig work can also help extend work opportunities in smaller towns and villages beyond large capital cities. In fact, 6 in 10 online gig workers live in smaller cities. But gig work is not without risks. In low-income countries, most people work outside the purview of labor regulations without access to social insurance and benefits. And for many gig workers, especially young people, there is often an unclear career pathway. A considerable wage gap also still exists. For example, on a major gig platform in Latin America, a female online gig worker's wage is only 68% that of her male counterparts. Governments and the private sector both have important roles to play in harnessing this potential while also addressing the risks. Digital platforms can help increase the visibility of informal workers. This can also support government efforts to expand social protection coverage for all. Some private companies are developing solutions to facilitate tax planning, savings, and financial access for gig workers. To support equitable, affordable broadband access, especially for disadvantaged groups like youth, women, and people in rural and hard-to-reach areas, countries can also prioritize investments to improve access to digital infrastructure, devices, and payment options. Countries can enhance social protection coverage of gig workers, partner with platforms, and experiment with new social insurance models and more modern, digitally enabled forms of collective bargaining. And governments can invest in strengthening their own capacity to collect data and monitor labor market trends in real time. With these and other initiatives, developing countries can leverage this growing part of the labor market to create new opportunities, expand economic inclusivity, and increase prosperity for their people.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everyone again. So we just heard a short video about this new report. It's actually keeping in with the AI theme of the partner summit that we and all the discussions that we had this morning. Just wanted to share the spotlight, shine the spotlight on a new form of work. That's online gig jobs. And you heard the video. This is a new report that the World Bank recently released with focus on online gig work. So why did we decide to focus on this? So one of the reasons we decided to focus on this work is that it's growing. It's increasing very rapidly. There are no absolutely established sources of data, so we really don't know. We don't understand how rapidly it's growing, where it's growing, who are the people who are doing this form of, what are they earning. So it was really important to just look at this type of work. Also, because firms are increasingly relying on digital platforms to source their talent, because it reduces the friction and the transaction cost in finding the right people that they need for their firms. And it's really rapidly changing where people work, the kind of skills they need, how they do this. And of course, because this is growing so rapidly, it's also important for policymakers to understand it very well, because there are some risks associated with this kind of work. So we decided to focus on what is called online gig work, which means we did not focus on the kind of gig work that happens in a location, like food delivery and ride hailing. We did not focus on that. We will focus on that in another report that we're just about to launch now, so coming soon. The reason we also focused on the online version of gig work is because it tends to remain a little bit under the radar screen. There are really 6 big questions that this report addresses. Number one, the question of how many people are already becoming or doing gig work. As I said, labor force surveys do not estimate this, yet we know that it's growing. Also, a lot of the recent literature on online gig work has looked at some of the large platforms only. And that raises the question about what is happening on the smaller platforms. What's happening about workers who are on the smaller, more regional, more local type of platforms? What happens to people who perhaps don't speak English? And so it was important to sort of estimate that entire market. So the first question is, how many gig workers are there? The second is, this report really looked at how inclusive is online gig work, which means we looked at about 6 different dimensions of inclusion. We looked at age, gender, where people are located. So is it a big city phenomena, or are people in smaller cities also able to participate in gig work? We looked at language. Is it really English speaking, or are people who don't speak English also participating? We looked at skills and earnings. So really 6 dimensions of inclusion is something that we really delved deeply into that question. The third question that we addressed in this report is it really dominated by the 4 or 5 big, large global platforms? What's the role of local platforms? And the fourth question was that really we flipped the question on the demand side. Like, what motivates firms? What kind of firms are looking for gig workers? And the fifth question in this report looks at the social protection aspect of these gigs. And the sixth actually lays out an operational blueprint for countries that may want to actually access the opportunities that are coming up in gig work, and also be able to address some of the risks that are associated. So it's a big report. It's a dense report, and I'm not going to go into detail, but just kind of share with you some quick findings that we came up with. So the first thing is we had to use a lot of very innovative methodologies to be able to do this work, because like I said, labor force surveys, several other sort of surveys that we depend on when we look at labor markets, they're just simply not there. So we used a very interesting mix of data science, of looking at web traffic, but we also did a big global survey, which we did in 17 countries across the world. We did it in 12 languages, exactly because of the previous point that I made about looking at people who don't speak English. So we used a combination. We also did a big survey with firms. So it's an interesting mix of surveys, data science, interviews that helped us build a database. So in all, we find that there are about 445 online gig platforms across the world. And surprise, surprise, actually, 3 out of the 4 platforms, and we have a big database on this, 3 out of 4 of them are not global. They are actually regional and local. And that tells you a little bit that a lot of the literature which has looked at only the global platforms might be actually missing, is in fact missing a big piece of this whole ecosystem, which is the local, more regional platforms. Now, why is it important to look at some of those local and regional platforms? You actually find that they are playing a really important role, but it's less known. They play an important role both on the supply side as well as the demand side. So on the supply side, it seems like some of these smaller platforms, more regional platforms, actually lower the entry barrier for people to get on to the digital platform. Sometimes some of them allow you to work or access gig jobs that are not in English, like I said. Some of them also innovate in terms of payment mechanisms that particularly adapt to that particular country's regulations, for example. And on the demand side, we found a lot of small companies, a lot of young startups, a lot of really small SMEs, some people who are just a lone entrepreneur will access some of these local platforms for their labor talent and accessing their talent in a flexible way. So they're playing an important role, but it's not really well recognized. Big finding of our report is that this is a non-negligible number of people now. It's about 12% of the global labor force. So like I said, we use two different methods. It was a difficult task in front of us, actually, to come up with a number, how many people. And so that's why we use these two different methods. The first method gives us a slightly lower bound of 154 million workers, but we think it's a gross underestimate because that was we looked at web traffic there, and we think that we've underestimated some of the traffic coming from China. So we are more confident about the number that came up with our second method, which is about over 400 million online gig workers. That's almost 12% of the total. Now, half of these people who are gig workers are young. And so this tells us a little bit about the opportunity here, particularly opportunity where countries struggle with very persistent, very high rates of youth unemployment. There's an opportunity here. Young people are really going to these digital platforms because it allows them a way to earn an income while also learning new digital skills. So usually when you put a training opportunity in front of a young person, there's a trade-off involved, right? Like, should I go in to get trained, or should I actually do something which earns an income, particularly in the countries that the World Bank works in? So this is an opportunity for young people to be learning on the job in some sense and learn these important skills. I also really appreciate how it gives them the flexibility to perhaps go to school, to do another job, and also the flexibility to manage their time. So from a youth employment perspective, this is a phenomena that's growing and really important for us as a development community to make sure that we're using some of the opportunities given us. For women, just because this is something that you can do from home, that you simply need access to digital connectivity, a device, and some level of skills, that you can access income earning opportunities. So a lot of women in some countries that we studied are actually more active in the online gig economy than they are because they face considerable constraints in accessing other sort of offline jobs and labor opportunities to income. So from a perspective of increasing female labor force participation, this is an opportunity. This actually was a big surprise, even for us in the study team, as we looked at where are these gig workers? Because normally you would think that it's in the capital cities of our developing countries, but actually it's not. A lot of the gig workers, 6 out of 10, are not in the capital cities. They're not even in the secondary cities, which are the top 10 cities in the country. They're actually in tertiary cities. And so this tells us that here is an opportunity for us to also address regional inequalities, spatial inequalities that a lot of countries struggle, because some of the smaller cities do not have any other jobs, good quality jobs that are available to them. And hence, this is, again, an opportunity to address that inequality. We also find that when you look at gig work, the question that comes to mind is it a full-time job? Is it something that they do full-time? So we had to use a very nuanced approach in terms of classifying what this job is. So we classified it on two indicators. One is what percentage of your income comes from gig, and the second is what percentage of your total time that you have is spent on gig work. And you can see that actually for a lot of people, this is a secondary or a marginal. Marginal means that you're spending a smaller fraction of your time on it. That you are doing this. So, but for a lot of people, from 22 to 39% in different regions, this is actually a full-time job as well. So there's a whole spectrum here. But a lot of people are dipping into this kind of work to also manage income smoothing when they've lost a job or there is some other sort of shock to their income that they're experiencing. Now, on the demand side, this is really an important finding from a development community that wants countries to grow their jobs. So if you want to grow your jobs in a particular country, you need to make sure that your firms are growing, because that's what's going to stimulate job creation. So from a demand side, we find that a lot of micro, small, and medium enterprises are actually increasingly turning to digital to get labor. And we did this survey. We find that there's a whole variety of reasons. Some of them want to be able to access a larger talent pool. NASA that said that this is an important source for them to get innovative ideas. This also reduces transaction costs and overcomes hiring barriers. So from a demand perspective, this is really important as well. Having said that, having talked about all of the opportunities, there are also some constraints. There are also some risks. But again, here, the narrative on online gig work has developed a lot more in the EU and the Europe and the developed country context. For developing countries where a large number of people are in any case in the informal sector, we've got to approach this a little bit differently. And the way to address social protection for some of our developing countries where almost 70–80% people are self-employed or in the informal market, we've got to think about social protection policies that actually include all, irrespective of their labor or their employment contract. And in the report, we talk about the importance of partnering with platforms to come up with innovative models, to do more experiments, and perhaps to think about partnering with platforms to also reach people in the informal sector, and also to rethink how we do collective bargaining. And maybe there are some new digital solutions. We talk about that in the report. So I'll stop here because there's no way I can cover all. We are now in the World Bank thinking about how to operationalize some of the insights that came out of this report, and would like to be able to experiment with new models in a few countries. So I'll stop here. We're also producing short notes that address a specific question in terms of the insights that we gathered in this report. Hopefully you will go to our website and look at it. I'll stop here. Thank you.